Knowing my video schedule, I know this video is gonna be late, but I can't pass up this chance to talk about a new Sonic game. Sonic Frontiers is the newest mainline Sonic game since 2017's Sonic Forces, which was, in a word, ass. But Sonic Frontiers was announced in 2021 with not just the promise of a new game, but an entirely new gameplay style for Sonic. Sonic, for the first time, was going open world. Or was it? Sonic Team was quick to make the distinction that Sonic Frontiers is not open world, but open zone. The initial reaction of most fans, myself included, was, "What the hell are you talking about, Sonic Team? Stop with the semantics and just tell us what the hell is going on with this game." To which Sonic Team responded by showing a bunch of incredibly lackluster gameplay footage, which nobody thought looked good, and then being really weirdly tight-lipped about what the hell kind of a game Sonic Frontiers actually was for months and months before release. The fandom resorted to relentlessly analyzing, footage of the game from the background of interviews at industry events, and this sense of looming dread came over the fandom. Everyone seemed to be expecting this game to be some kind of disaster, a weird inversion of the usual Sonic Cycle meme, with which I am all too familiar. Yes, as I have hinted at in the past, I am a massive Sonic fan, which you might not have guessed considering I've never made a video about Sonic in my many years of making videos for the internet at a rate of about 2 a year, but Sonic 1 was the very first game I ever played, and there are games from every single era of Sonic that I hold near and dear to my heart, even while they give me severe heartburn. So yes, let it be known that this video is not from an outsider's perspective. I am a longtime Sonic player, an old Sonic fan, a Sonic boomer, if you will, with the Genesis cartridges and Xbox achievements to prove it.
The horror. The horror. The horror.
So yeah, the Sonic cycle. We all know it, but somehow, despite all the doom and gloom and lame-looking footage, Sonic Frontiers finally came out November 8th, 2022, and most people seemed to really like it. A lot of fans seemed to feel that Frontiers was something new and different. It felt fun and fresh and polished, and basically every word that Sonic fans would not use to describe Sonic Forces. And how did I feel? Well, that's why I'm making this video. So let's talk about Sonic Frontiers. And at this point, the game has been out for multiple months, so I'm gonna say spoiler warning for the whole game. So there's your warning. And if you're interested in seeing the future videos I make about who knows what games, hit the subscribe button. It's free to do, it lets you know when I've uploaded a new video, and it helps the channel grow. So I think the first big question that pretty much everyone had going into this game is, what the hell is an open zone game? And for the life of me, I don't know why Sonic Team was all coy about this. It's not that weird of a concept. The game is split into 5 open zones, massive islands where you can pretty much go anywhere within them at any time. There are various activities to be done in these open zones that lead to unlocking more of them, but put a pin in the progression for now. How are the open zones themselves? Well, there is a lot to like here. The open zones are really atmospheric, the music is nice, the size of these islands is genuinely impressive, and exploring them can actually be pretty relaxing. An extremely important factor in this is the fact that Sonic almost never talks outside of cutscenes. Apparently, this varies somewhat between platforms. I haven't found much info on the specifics of this, but I found a Twitter thread by this user showcasing over 10 minutes of unused Sonic dialogue that would have played during open zone gameplay. Some of these are apparently still in the game, but only triggered by standing in one place for over 10 minutes. Very odd, but from listening to a lot of these, yeah, I'm glad they were cut.
I'll take my ghost-free desert, thank you. That was fun! Woo!
Exploring without constant quipping, no constant yelling and wooing by Sonic, it's actually pretty nice. The visuals are a mixed bag for me, though. The look they picked for all these ancient ruins and alien structures is pretty cool, but there's a feeling that the game doesn't have much of a visual style outside of that. The plains and forests and the drab, overcast sky, it looks kind of nice in isolation, but it's just a little boring. And aside from the flourishes of big ancient structures, the islands just feel very generic. One of the biggest letdowns of the entire game was after progressing through a forest zone, a desert zone, and a volcano zone, the last 2 islands are just forest themed again. Kinda lame. Pop-in is also a consistent issue. You often won't see platforming elements until they're right in front of your face, and on top of it just making the game feel artificial and cheap, it just kills any feeling of anticipation. Some of the best moments in this game outside of the boss fights are when you see a big cool structure in the distance, a gargantuan tangle of platforms and rails, and you think, I want to play on that. I want to figure out how to get there and then see where it takes me and what's at the end of it. But it seems like these few important structures were given special exception to be allowed to render at a distance greater than like 10 feet, because everything else in the game doesn't exist until you're close enough to see it with Sonic's canonically biologically terrible eyesight.
I'm legally blind.
I can only assume that they did this for hardware performance reasons, but come on, I've got a 2080 Super. Like, yeah, it's not a fucking 4090, but don't tell me that consoles and PCs that run Red Dead Redemption 2 can't handle a decent draw distance for a game that looks like this. The only other reason I can think they would have limited draw distance for the platforming sections is so that the open zones would look cleaner. Like, maybe they just didn't want the world to look like a nightmare spaghetti of rails and platforms. But I don't know, I think that would have been kinda cool. I actually enjoy seeing rails and ramps and springs everywhere because, you know, that's Sonic. Seeing all the platforming shit doesn't make me go, oh, this doesn't look visually appealing. It makes me think, oh, fun stuff to play on, cool. Also, if my footage looks significantly different from your game or from other footage you've seen, it's probably because I turned off motion blur. Normally, blur is a very important part of making Sonic feel fast, but for some reason, in this game in particular, I found the blur to be overwhelming and genuinely kind of sickening, which is sad because combat with blur on looks great, but platforming with blur makes it look like someone smeared Vaseline on my screen, and as a bonus, makes me physically ill. So, you know, chalk this one up to a adult Sonic fan senior moment, and let's not dwell on it. It is kind of a shame though, because running around at high speed is just always going to be fun to me. The most basic controls of Sonic feel great, and they're customizable, which is an awesome feature. Boosting feels good. It isn't as fast as before, but it's a lot more controllable, and you've got some really precise control when you hold Y to do the side loop, which is Sonic's new signature move. And the drop dash is in a 3D game, that's pretty cool. It's been nerfed into the ground thanks to the lack of momentum in this game, but it's still nice to see it in 3D. The main issues I have with the controls stem from how Sonic interacts with the world. Most of the time, Sonic's feet feel like they're glued to the ground, and he'll just hold fast to the ground even when you go off what looks like a sheer cliff or an obvious ramp. And other times, hitting a tiny rock on the ground or the smallest bump will send Sonic careening into the air tricking away without a care for where the fuck the game just sent you. This is honestly pretty funny the first time it happens, but the flip side of that is trying in vain to boost and jump over gaps that look totally reasonable, but your feet keep getting stuck to the ground and your jump retains almost no momentum. Here's the thing, and I know momentum is kind of a trigger word for a lot of people in the Sonic fandom. For me, the most fun part of controlling Sonic is the momentum. When you feel like you can build speed and do things that weren't necessarily intended, but feel like valid, emergent gameplay solutions to problems. Rails are the best example of this. Boosting and jumping off a rail will send you screaming across the landscape, so, you know, it's not like the concept of momentum is absent from this game. But they seem to want it to make as little impact as possible. They don't want to have to design the entire game around the possibility of players using momentum to get to places they weren't supposed to be, or break all of their design challenges by, you know, ramping off of random terrain. And I get that, but like, you know, doing that shit is fun. Some of the most satisfying moments I had playing this game were getting to places in a way other than what the game intended. I understand that it's harder to design a game around that kind of control, but I mean, come on, this is what Sonic is all about. From the start, what set Sonic apart was his ability to take advantage of slopes to gain and use momentum. It's just kind of sad to see a once core aspect of Sonic's movement, that ability to experiment and improvise using your surroundings, be taken away, or at least downplayed. Whatever. It's not like moving around is bad, especially with the Showin's Momentum Tweaks mod. That shit's a game changer. Just, the exploration could have been a lot more fun with just a little more momentum. If you don't believe me and you have the PC version, seriously, get Showin's Momentum Tweaks, just try it, and tell me it doesn't feel a million times better. Running around big open areas is still fun enough on a basic level, especially when you max out your rings and just go zooming across the map. But of course, there's plenty more to do in Sonic Frontiers. The main objective is to gather the 7 Chaos Emeralds and fight the big boss at the end of each open zone, and pretty much everything you do in some way contributes to that, indirectly or directly. So how do we get there? Well, like every open world game now, the map is just littered with icons, the first of which you'll need to do are challenges. Various mini-games and puzzles that uncover the map and reward you with mostly stat-increasing items, more on that system later. I think by now, my hatred of mini-games is pretty well documented, and that has not changed. There are a handful of these challenges that I find pretty fun, mostly the kind that just show you some squares and tell you to go through them, like, that's all a minigame in a platformer needs to be. The main mechanic is moving around, so just make me move around in some specific ways with a time limit and challenge done. Or show me a faraway location and say, get there quickly. There you go. They're all easy as hell, but, you know, it's a game presumably for kids, right? And then there are the true minigames, the ones completely divorced from standard gameplay. This is like half of them. Kick the ball through the circle, hit all the switches, step on all the squares in a row, dodge left and right with a time limit so generous you can literally just shut your eyes and randomly mash and you'll still win. These are mostly boring, and I don't care for most of them, though it was pretty funny to discover that you can completely cheat the jump rope challenges because blocking in the air will just freeze Sonic there indefinitely, so you can just do this. It's amazing stuff here. And then there's the exciting new minigame territory of drawing circles. Draw a circle around a light. Draw a circle around a torch. Draw a circle around a pile of leaves. Congrats, you've completed the rest of the challenges in Sonic Frontiers. Why with these?
Perfect circle.
Another activity you'll be doing in the open zones is these little mini platforming sections scattered around the world. These I actually really like for the most part. Frontiers' 2D platforming controls are more or less the same as they've been for the last decade or so since Sonic Colors, and these little mini-levels do very little to change up that basic formula. There's a section near the end of the game that's just several extended platforming sequences with these basic mechanics, and it's one of the best parts of the game. You can feel that some real effort went into making the platforming here fun and challenging in a way that most of the game isn't. The smaller, more common versions of these platforming levels are sometimes a little too automatic, but they're quick and satisfying and they look and feel cool. There's also a small reward at the end of them to give you an actual incentive to do them. The most important of these rewards are memory tokens. You need a certain amount of these to unlock conversations with Sonic's friends who are just hanging out in random spots around the islands. Each island has its own mini-story with one of Sonic's friends, slowly uncovering the mystery of the Starfall Islands. And these little mini-stories lead to, guess what? More mini-games. Sometimes you're cutting grass or carrying cocos around smashy death pillars, and sometimes you're playing a mandatory pinball game. But the one thing they have in common is, being pretty bad. Oh, and by the way, I was lying about them being side stories. They definitely aren't. You are required to do most of these to progress through the main story. The pinball one is especially fucking heinous. Like, holy shit, this is so bad. Crazy thing is, there are a handful of kinda fun minigames, the best of which is this Ikaruga knockoff, and it lasts like 1 minute, while this fucking pinball game asks you to get, no shit, 5 million points. Look how many points you start off getting. Like, did it really need to be 5 fucking million? There's so many things in this game where I just imagine myself as a child playing it, and I think it would make me cry. Like, I'm an adult, so I can deal with some frustration, but a little kid with a fucking smooth brain is gonna get to this light puzzle or this pinball section, and they're gonna have a fucking meltdown. Like, this is Christmas-ruining stuff here. It's kind of incredible. Sonic also has stats now, which I guess he's had stats before, but not quite like this. The two stats I was most interested in, ring capacity and speed, are increased by finding lost Cocos around, essentially the Koroks from Breath of the Wild, except mostly way less interesting. They're just kinda scattered around randomly, they're really hard to see a lot of the time, and you have to get a fucking ton of them to increase your stats by a single level. and then you can only level up one level at a time, and it takes forever, and ugh. No joke, the best way to get these is to play the fishing minigame, which, yeah, everyone's favorite part of Sonic Adventure 1 is back, fishing with Big the Cat. Honestly, I can't even muster up the energy to feel any kind of emotion about this, so like, I'm just gonna pretend it doesn't exist. Same with the slot machine event. These are so pointless and lame that I have already wasted too many words talking about them. Your other stats are attack and defense, which you level up using fruits acquired from platforming sections, map challenges, or fighting small enemies. The minor enemies are all over the place, but they're mostly easy as hell and not all that interesting. A lot of them can only be damaged by one move, and once you know what it is, they just kinda die in one hit. The stat increases are mainly to prepare you to fight the Guardians, essentially mini-bosses. Now, this isn't trying to be Devil May Cry, so don't expect a ton of complexity from the combat here. There are a lot of special moves, but in essence, there's only 4 in the entire combat system. You mash X for a normal combo, you hold Y and draw a circle around them to side-loop and break certain enemy defenses, and then there's 2 different kinds of special move. There's one that hits a bunch of times, and there's one that hits once. Like, these are the same move, but the button combo is different, and one of them does more damage than the other because you get it later, but, like, they do the same thing. They all look very nice, and the combat actually feels pretty satisfying overall, I have to admit. But the weird thing is, most of the mini-bosses don't really engage with this combo system in any meaningful way. Most of them have their own little minigame you have to play to make them vulnerable, and then you can just wail on them until they make you play the minigame again. Normally, I would hold this against them more, but honestly, the minigames here typically aren't bad, and there's an admirable level of variety to them. Not all of them are winners, some are just overlong QuickTime events, but I like the concept of using platforming to fight enemies. I'm actually kinda shocked at how much I enjoy some of these, I really wasn't expecting that. Now, your reward for fighting mini-bosses is yet another item, Portal Gears, and these unlock the final main aspect of the core gameplay loop of Sonic Frontiers, Cyberspace. Okay, so originally here I had a long rant about how Sonic's boost formula has been getting worse and worse over time since Unleashed, and all these other comparisons to the daytime stages in Unleashed, but it started getting very old Sonic fan yells at Cloud, so instead of that, I'm going to try to evaluate the Cyberspace levels for what they are, rather than what I wanted them to be, which was a Sonic Unleashed level pack, and obviously, they were never going to be that, so, why pretend like they were? And with that, I can say that divorced from the context of other boost games, the Cyberspace levels are still not very good. Honestly, I thought for sure that the open world in this game was going to be an afterthought, like a total dud, and that the isolated levels would surely save this game. But the Cyberspace levels are an absolute chore. They're this weird middle ground between classic adventure-style levels and boost-style levels, and it just never quite gels. It's like every time there's a section where I just want to boost and go fast, I'm stuck with the weakest boost of all time in these dull sections where there's just not much going on. Nothing to look at, no split-second reactions to make, just slow, sticky, Sonic Colors-ass platforming. When this game is trying to be an Unleashed level, it is the worst. And then there's the more adventure-style 3D sections, which are not great, but not as bad as the boosting sections. The precision platforming is sluggish and boring if you do it safely, the way the game wants you to. The homing attack is slow and unsatisfying when Sonic has to hit an actual enemy with it, so skip homing attack chains at every opportunity. The way to have some fun with these sections is to either use the boost in combination with well-timed stomps to speed up platforming, or use the homing boost to just skip through the level. Yeah, so if you boost out of a homing attack, Sonic retains the homing attack speed, and you can go flying across massive chunks of the level. I do have to admit, finding places to use this is kind of fun, but it also doesn't really save these levels from being mostly ass. I was just constantly frustrated playing through these stages, and it was not because they were hard. Far from it. There was one level that had an S-rank time that was kind of challenging, and for some reason, it's the second level in the entire game. Yeah, like, this level is the hard one. Playing this level really just set me up for disappointment, because trying to optimize my time in this level was pretty damn fun, and I kept waiting for that next level that would really test my skills and get me to play it a dozen times, try different routes, and really optimize my time, but that next level just never came. The second stage is a real speedrun-like challenge, and every level after that is just an easy 1 or 2 try S rank. And we haven't even talked about the actual level layouts. Almost every level is a revamped version of an old stage from either Adventure 2, Unleashed, or Generations. And I can't lie, I got a little excited when I recognized City Escape. Like, I'm only human, I can't help feeling nostalgic. But did they really need to remake this many stages? I know there were at least 5 or 6 stages ripped straight from Unleashed, more than I care to go back and count taken from Generations, and I know I recognized City Escape, Skyrail, Radical Highway, Green Forest, and Metal Harbor from Sonic Adventure 2. Was that enough? How many levels in this game are even original? It's for sure less than half. Seeing these old stages again just makes me want to go back and play the games that they ripped these stages from. And frankly, I don't give a single shit what story reason they came up with to justify this. There is no good reason for every Cyberspace level to just reuse the Generations versions of Green Hill, Chemical Plant, or Sky Sanctuary for its visuals. Generations came out 11 years ago. Why are we just reusing this same old tired shit? It's so boring. Every stage that isn't just one of those 3 types just uses this new, warped, urban highway aesthetic that looks like what would happen if you asked an AI to make the most boring possible version of Radical Highway. They feel like custom levels that a player would make in like Halo Forge or something, just stitched together out of pre-made generic assets, mixing and matching pieces to recreate the structure of old levels with none of the flavor and none of the heart that made those old levels memorable. They just feel hollow. And devoid of challenge. Most of the red rings are just slapped down right in places that are nearly impossible to miss. There are very few alternate routes through these levels unless you're exploiting the homing boost to just bypass half the level. And you know, part of me is inclined to cut them some slack, because after all, these games are made for kids, right? And since the rewards you get are actually tied to progression, these levels have to be easy enough for kids to figure out. But at the same time, what kid is gonna get these old-ass references? Sure, you make a game that spells out everything you have to do and has a slower pace and whatever for the kids, sure, I get that. But then, no kid in the universe is gonna appreciate your level layout reference to Sonic Adventure 2, a game from over 2 decades ago. By the time I was near the end, the game was becoming a chore to play, and it was almost entirely the fault of these Cyberspace levels. They are uniformly awful. They are just the worst part of this game in almost every possible way. And sadly, they're the last and most important step of getting the Chaos Emeralds. Each level comes with 4 objectives: finish the level, finish in a certain amount of time, finish with a certain number of rings, and find all the red star rings. Completing each one of these will give you a vault key, and these are the last collectibles that you need to actually get the Chaos Emeralds. And once you've got all 7, it's time to move on to each island's boss. These boss fights are the epitome of style over substance. The mechanics are even simpler than the normal combat. They're easy as hell, they're nothing but pure spectacle, and they might just be the best part of this entire game. There's not even really anything I can add. Like, just watch this shit. Like, holy... Okay, so everything about these fights is just shallow spectacle, designed specifically to get me excited. Just the fact that after decades of Sonic games, I can finally play as Super Sonic and do more than just bump into things, these are worth it just for that fact alone. Super Sonic flies around, punches, makes fucking shadow clones, and... No, he can't. No. Oh my god. They did it. Final Fantasy Sonic X from Newgrounds, 2007 or whatever, how old that shit is. Fuck yes. Sure, mechanically, these fights are nothing special, but sometimes I just don't care. I can't speak for anyone but myself, but for me, these boss fights worked like gangbusters. I have basically no complaints about them that wouldn't be overruled by Super Sonic with a giant sword. Now, something else outside of the boss fights that I do have to complain about is the soundtrack. Now hold on, wait. I know the boss themes are great. Like, holy shit. They absolutely fuck. And you know what? The overworld themes are pretty nice too. They're subtle and they kind of tend to fade into the background, but that's clearly what they were going for, and overall they're pretty easy on the ears. No complaints there. The kicker for me is, once again, Cyberspace. Now, I have said before that I'm not any kind of music expert, and that is still very true. But what I am is that annoying guy that you met in college who constantly listens to video game OSTs and nothing else, and insists that it's better than mainstream music. There are a total of 30 Cyberspace levels in Frontiers, and each one has a unique song, which is incredibly impressive. But the levels are so short and, well, bad, that there's no time to really soak in and get a feel for any of the level themes. And that's sad because a lot of these songs are awesome in isolation, but they don't feel like they're tied to the levels they're heard in. This song is one of the few that I heard while playing and thought, yeah, this song is working really well for this specific level. This ethereal trance feel really works for Sky Sanctuary, even though the music doesn't really evoke Dragon Road Act 3 from Sonic Unleashed, which is what this level is referencing, but whatever, this one works. The rest though, I don't know, the music just feels kinda tacked on. It doesn't feel like it's working together with the visuals and level design. I'm sorry, but like dubstep doesn't really evoke either Chemical Plant Zone or Metal Harbor. Really, there's just not a lot to work with in these levels. Like, how do you musically distinguish one generic, tired Green Hill Zone level from the next? Yeah, I don't know. You probably can't. This is especially painful to me because music is probably Sonic's most consistently excellent feature, so, you know, expectations are always pretty high for Sonic soundtracks, and I wish the game did a better job of highlighting the music. They also went way overboard with how boosting changes the music. In previous boost games, the music would change a bit when you boosted, just to add a little impact to your boosts. A whooshing sound, a little speed up in Generation's case, drop the bass a bit, and it really sounded like you were moving fast. In Frontiers, the boost is barely any faster than regular running, the sound effect for it is weak as hell, visually it looks like almost nothing, and yet you boost, and suddenly half of the soundtrack is just inaudible. It sounds like I'm listening to the game with the tinny piece of shit earbuds that came with my first off-brand MP3 player in like 2008. Maybe more of these songs would have an impact if I could hear any amount of bass. Here's a song that's really catchy and enjoyable. Except it doesn't sound like this in-game. In-game, it sounds like this. The really sad thing here is that I think my issues with the soundtrack are not really the soundtrack's fault. The music in these levels is, I think, good for what it is, even if it's not really my kind of music, but the game is doing everything in its power to make me completely not care about the music. Levels are too short, boosting messes with the music too much, and the music can't be made to match the visuals because the visuals are all so stock and repetitive. None of this is the music's fault, but it does end up meaning that the music made pretty much no impact on me in the 30 or so hours I spent playing Sonic Frontiers. This is the first time in a Sonic game I've had anything bad to say about the soundtrack, and it's kinda sad. And of course, the last thing left to talk about is the story, and I've left this for last because my summary is gonna be pretty brief, but it's also gonna be completely spoilers. So, basically, Sonic and pals are checking out the Starfall Islands because the Chaos Emeralds are there for some reason. Sonic's friends get sucked into cyberspace, not going into detail on what cyberspace is exactly, but Sonic gets out by going really fast, and a mysterious voice tells him to get the Chaos Emeralds, destroy the big robots called Titans on each island, and that will supposedly free his friends from cyberspace. Sonic goes and does that, while an AI called Sage tells him to quit it and just constantly talks shit to him. She and Eggman spend most of the story doing nothing, sitting around in cyberspace. When Sonic destroys the last Titan, it turns out that, oopsie, this was actually a Shadow of the Colossus situation, and the Titans were keeping the big bad called the End contained. Turns out all the technology on the island is from ancient aliens that came to Earth with the Chaos Emeralds and then sealed the End into cyberspace, and then put their souls in the Cocos, and then all died? But also, they didn't all die because they're related to the Chows, and they all look like Chaos, and Yeah, who the hell knows? Anyway, Sonic gets Eggman and his friends' help to get the Chaos Emeralds one last time to fight the End with Sage, who sacrifices herself to beat the moon. And have you seen Gurren Lagann? Because, well, it's basically that, but with Chaos Emeralds instead of drills. Anyway, so in case that slightly dismissive summary didn't make it clear enough, I didn't really care about the plot in this game, and honestly, that's fine. Story is not why I play Sonic games, and if it was, I probably would have stopped a long time ago. I didn't feel like the plot was delivered in a particularly satisfying or interesting way. The stakes were not really clear until they were suddenly the end of the world out of nowhere, and I don't know, ancient aliens just suddenly becoming the basis of the Sonic world and the origin point for, some of the most important things in the Sonic universe. It just doesn't feel like Sonic to me. It's like if Stars and Mario were suddenly revealed to be space aliens and, well, okay, point taken, but the point is that the Chaos Emeralds are not something that I ever felt needed to be explained. They've just been this unknown power from time immemorial since, well, time immemorial as far as Sonic games are concerned. An explanation, especially one as tired and tropey as ancient aliens, is just not particularly compelling to me. I've seen people saying that the callbacks and references throughout are the real problem with the story, but personally, I think they're the best element. For example, Knuckles here talking about how he's the last of his people and the Coco reminding him of that. It's a really nice dialogue exchange that incorporates Knuckles' backstory in an organic and meaningful way. The character work here is genuinely the best part of this game's story, and possibly the best character work ever done in a Sonic game. Tails has an arc of worrying that he's a burden to his friends and resolving to be more confident and independent, and it's really nice. The callbacks here, again, were just used to give context to Tails' character, and I don't know why anyone would call that a bad thing. Sure, there's a little bit of, hey, member Dark Gaia, member the Space Colony arc, and yeah, I do remember those things, and I liked them, and I'm, fine with seeing them be referenced. They were important events in the history of these characters. It makes sense to talk about them. I don't see any reason why every new Sonic game should have to pretend like the events of previous games never happened. Though, if I'm honest, I wouldn't mind at all if every game after this just pretended like all the ancient aliens stuff in this game didn't happen. Overall, I'm pretty torn on Sonic Frontiers. I will never not give Sonic Team credit for trying new things with Sonic. I and a lot of fans would probably be happy to get a new game every year that plays exactly like Generations or Mania, but Sonic Team clearly wants to push the bounds of what Sonic can be. And I think this game has shown that Sonic can be open world. There are things here that really work. This gameplay formula is worth exploring and refining. And there's a lot of refining that needs to be done, but I think the core concept here is definitely sound. There's jank here, there's no avoiding that, and even though this might not be the perfect open world Sonic game, it's also the first, so I am willing to cut it some slack. What I'm not going to cut them slack on, though, are the Cyberspace levels, because Sonic Team have spent years making levels in this vein, and for them to turn out this bad is kind of shocking. Though, I guess after Sonic Forces, I'm not sure what I expected, but I was hoping for better than this. And then I start thinking about how the story didn't really do that much for me, and I didn't care for most of the soundtrack, but then I also remember that I can have an extremely chill and satisfying time running around the open world, and all the complaints I have feel just a little further away. I really can't bring myself to dislike this game, and that might sound like damning with faint praise, but when you're a Sonic boomer like me, you take what you can get. Anyway, that is gonna do it for this video. I will make more than one video this year also. Hopefully more than 2. I only made 2 videos in 2022. Hey, maybe 2023 I can get it up to 3. We'll see. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you next time.